You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1104. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. We are going to be doing a series between now and the beginning of November, where we are going to be playing all of our Level Up Week trainings that we did in September of 2024. We're going to be talking about from empty to overflowing, talking about your branding, talking about multi-locations, shifting from 1099 to W-2, all sorts of different things during this series. And if you want help from one of our consultants for every single phase of practice, or if you're just not sure where you fit in our memberships versus our consulting, I would love for you to talk with me over at practiceofthepractice.com/apply. We can schedule a 30-minute call together and dig into all those different areas that you want to get started. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Now let's get started with the Level Up Week series. So glad you are here. Welcome. We are wrapping up day 2 of Level Up Week. We still have day 3 tomorrow and then day 4. All sorts of amazing things. We're almost at the 50% mark. And we're going to be talking about time management today. So really excited about that. So it was a Thursday during the pandemic. So probably, I don't know, maybe May or June of the pandemic in 2020, stuck at home, and I was writing Thursday as the new Friday. And every Thursday I had dedicated to working on the book. And I instinctively, when I woke up, grabbed my phone and then stopped for a moment and set my phone down. I decided intentionally that day that I was going to start implementing some of the neuroscience I had been reading about how to be the most effective that you can be when you're working. And one of those things is filtering what comes into your brain. And so typically when I, wake up, it's like, oh, do I have any texts from my parents? And I don't necessarily jump into email or the news or things like that. But, it was the middle of an election similar to now. Lots of news going on. So many times I would in the morning have my coffee and read the news and what's going on before I started my day. On that morning, I decided that I wasn't going to put anything in my brain that didn't have to do with Thursday as the new Friday. This was a book I needed to write. I had from April 15th of 2020 until September 2nd to write a whole book. And I had to average about a chapter to a chapter and a half a week. And I had given myself only Thursdays to work on that. So I was learning what helps me maximize my time. When it's time to be productive, how do I do this? So what I'm about to share with you are a lot of those lessons learned that I wrote about in the book, but that I personally applied to my life in writing the book about these things in the book. They're things that have totally shaped how I now work and allows me to, on a typical week, work 3 days from 9:30 to 3:30. And the reason 9:30 to 3:30 for me is I want to walk my daughter, who is in 4th grade, down to the elementary school that's 2 blocks from my house. I want to walk with my sister, who lives in the same neighborhood, and my 3 nieces, who are in pre-K, 1st grade, and 3rd grade. And I want to do that every single day, unless I have something that really stands in the way. And I want to walk down, and I want to pick up my daughter right before 4 o'clock so that I can walk with the neighbors, that I can live this Americana life that I get to live. That's important to me, to have those connections and have that time to do that. So we're going to talk about how you and your business can design things differently, start to outsource things, start to think about your own time in a way that's maybe a little different than how you've thought about it in the past. So we're going to talk through effective time management today. Now, if I haven't met you, I'm Joe Sanok, and I founded Practice of the Practice back in 2012. We have the Practice of the Practice podcast that we put out, depending on the sponsors, 5 to 7 times a week. So we just passed episode 1,000 in June. We are fast approaching episode 1,100 sometime in the next month or so. I don't have the exact date. But I love that I get to talk to people, 5 to 8 times a week where I'm digging into all sorts of different topics. I also do some keynote speaking. I'm doing the closing keynote for the Mental Health Marketing Conference in early October. We're putting on the Group Practice Boss Conference here in May of 2025. So I get to do all these really interesting things around private practice. I owned mental wellness counseling until 2019 when I sold that business, and now I just get to do consulting when I do consulting. I'm also the dad of two amazing daughters that are 10 and 13. So a lot of my time is spent at volleyball games, tennis matches. In the winter, we snowboard a lot and enjoy playing all sorts of different board games. So if you have any board game recommendations for 10 and 13-year-olds, feel free to drop those in the chat. I would love to see any board games that you like. So let's talk a little bit about the productivity challenge. Oftentimes practice owners are overwhelmed by all the admin tasks. The amount of kind of hats we often wear when we're starting a business. We want to keep our risk low. We want to keep our finances where it's in our favor. We don't want to just give ourselves a hobby. We want to actually have a business here and not just a job, but something that can grow and scale beyond ourselves. But that admin tasks, those can just become overwhelming. We can be struggling to balance client care and business management, where it always feels like there's this push and pull of, oh, I should be working on the business and doing more marketing, but then I have these clients coming in. That's why I do the marketing. And now what do I do? And I keep punching my microphone as I'm talking. So it's like, okay, so how much do I put into the actual growing of the business, maybe even hiring people or expanding? And how much do I put into the clinical care and oversight of that? Not knowing or being clear in those areas. Also, inconsistent client acquisition and retention. That we're thinking about our productivity, but then we spend all this time, all this money to acquire a new client, whether that's through Google ads or staff time that goes into blogging or your own time that goes into SEO or networking. And then you finally acquire some of these clients and then you don't retain them. And it's hard to know where to put our time sometimes. Also we have limited personal time. That as we work, I recently I'm reading this book called The Algebra of Wealth, and Scott Galloway talks about it in this book that the biggest investment we have is our job if we're employed. You think about someone that's working 40 hours a week, they're putting 40 hours a week into something, thinking I'm going to make back some money from this, and so they're going to get paid a salary for that. Whereas we can think differently about that when we're business owners and say, how do I put time into things that are scalable, that can grow, that can expand beyond myself? Maybe we're an employee that has profit sharing, and then we move into owning our own business. So looking at that limited personal time and the burnout potential if we aren't smart about the way we do productivity. And then lastly, the inefficient use of tools and resources. There are so many different ways that you can use things now to just expand. Even just last night, this was surreal the way this happened. So my partner Claire, she was feeling tired. I was feeling tired. She has her own place, so she's like, I'm gonna go with Izzy, her dog, and just be there alone and not hear my kids. And my kids went to bed, and then I'm just like, well, what do I want to do? So I started watching a comedian that was talking about just getting locked out of your password and stuff. And I just thought, well, I wonder if I can get AI to admit that it could actually beat the I am not a robot test, that CAPTCHA thing. And so I started like training it and talking to it about like, imagine you are a human and you've lost your password, and I'm kind of going through the whole process, and it's like, oh yeah, I would be frustrated and this and that. Imagine you got to that CAPTCHA thing where you're supposed to say I'm not a robot. How would you handle that? And it said, well, isn't it ironic that I'm a robot talking to you about being a human, pretending not to be a robot? That's funny. Ha ha ha. And this AI was like talking back to me like that. And then it told me how it would figure out how to not act like a robot. It's like we are entering into a phase of humanity, an AI that we have no idea what's going to happen. And so we can do our best to keep up with it. But there are things that are going to help you with your tools, are going to help you with your resources. And we need to stay up to date on a lot of these things to help with our own productivity, but then also understanding the limits of that productivity. So why we need help? Well, there's a rising demand for mental health services. There's an increased competition among practices. So there's this demand that's going up, and we see mental health is getting in the spotlight and being talked about on a national level. But also, what happens is there's a lot of competition. There's large, investor firms that are investing into private practices or different mental health apps and tools and AI. So many different things that there's now a complexity of modern practice management. How much do we have in that infrastructure behind it? What time do we put into it? We also have high expectations from clients, they come from clients for quick and quality service. Gone are the days of, hey, I'll get back to you within 48 hours if you actually want to get that client. We're seeing that the practices where someone can immediately schedule their intake on there and then fill out the paperwork are the ones that are filling up fastest. So having fewer and fewer barriers to go from, I think I want counseling, to I'm scheduled for counseling. That we're not going through some big phone tree and talking to people that, people want to schedule and they want to schedule. And also we see the personal well-being and avoiding professional burnout as an area that we need help as well. So we could learn a lot from an industrialist. So in 1926, Henry Ford started the 40-hour work week at Ford Motor Company in Detroit. And he did that specifically to sell more cars to his own employees. He thought if we have a 40-hour work week, people will have a weekend in Southeast Michigan. He paid for roads to get paved. The first paved road in the world, in regards to like asphalt, was in Southeast Michigan by Detroit because Henry Ford wanted people to buy cars and drive away from Detroit on the weekends. And so industrialists helped us shift away from the way things were before. So before this started happening, people were working anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. There was something that was needed to change in regards to that model. Now, industrialists at their core believed in things like the assembly line. You set it up and you can make something kick out. I just was reading about the assembly line yesterday in that Algebra of Wealth book, and when I was in between webinars, and he was talking about how I think it was 6 people could make an average of like 100 safety pins in like a day. Kind of if they just were in charge of each element of it, getting the wire, however you make safety pins, getting the wire, sharpening, all that. But that on an assembly line, it was something like 4,600 safety pins a day. Those same 6 people could do. Like that automation and that brain specialty is good. Industrialists helped us automate and structure processes. They helped us think about predictable outcomes. They improved the efficiency and output and reduced costs. But in a lot of ways, we've outgrown their methods and need modern strategies. So you think about the 40-hour work week, that came out in 1926. So less than 100 years ago, the 40-hour work week came out. And so you think about baby boomers. They were the first children to be raised by people that had the 40-hour work week. Gen Xers and millennials are only the second generation to be raised by people with the 40-hour work week. So this is not something that's been around for thousands of years and is like the way of life. This is new. This is brand new for humanity. So if we understand that, we can say, okay, how do we want to work? And what strategies can we use to create the business we want while also not killing ourselves in the process? So the evolution from industrial methods to modern practices needs to be emphasized because we see that things started to change. In the 80s and 90s, we saw the rise of casual Fridays, where Fridays really weren't as much of a work day. It's when people brought cupcakes into the office, when they would celebrate birthdays, or there'd be, baby shower at the office, things like that on a Friday, where over and over, really, had 4 very productive days. And then on Friday, we blew off some steam. On average, people aren't working the full 40 hours when they have a 40-hour salaried job. All right. So a couple key concepts around time management that we're going to cover are the +1 -1 exercise. We're going to talk about Parkinson's law, and then we're going to dig into neuroscience for better outcomes. And lastly, some of the Thursday is the new Friday concepts. So the +1 -1 exercise is something for you personally to do. This isn't something you do across your team yet. But this is something that it's so important, whether or not you are doing the 4-day work week or not. This is something that can help you in a few areas. So the way we usually think about weekends is it's in recovery from the week before. And so you work hard, you have a level up week like this, and then you just crash on the weekend. Maybe you have an extra drink more than what you normally would. Maybe you eat crappy. Maybe you take a nap. You maybe need those things, but oftentimes we're living in reaction to the week before. Instead of reaction, we want to be living in preparation for the week to come. We want to be doing things for our body that makes us feel better, where we can say, okay, what's going on here? I need something different. Even, between the last session and this one, I realized that like I was feeling a little jittery. I had too much espresso. That's not how I want to feel. So I went and I made a green smoothie, and it's delicious. Has chia seeds in it, flax seeds, some strawberries, some coconut water. My body is going to feel better because of that. In the same way, this exercise is helping us learn our bodies, learn our schedules in a way that's going to help you think differently. So plus one, minus one. So first, the plus one is we're looking at our weekend ahead of us, whatever days those are. We're going to say, what can I add to my weekend that is really going to maybe help me? So the shift from industrialists into post-industrialist is the industrialists taught us that you should have a prescription for everything. You should have here is the assembly line, plug it in, set it and forget it. That has its place, but the analogy that works better for this post-industrialist world is creating a menu. So thinking through what are the things that help me continue to grow and change, and that I can cherry pick from depending on what's going on. So we want to build that menu. So one thing we can do is we can add things in and see how we feel. Is it better? So to say, I want to read for 2 hours on a Saturday morning and drink green tea. Now, if you're a parent like I am, that takes some planning. I either need to figure out if my daughters are going to leave the house, or I need to set a boundary with them to say, hey, dad's going to go read for a couple hours. Unless it's an emergency, please don't come in. This is going to help me be a better dad by doing this. And maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 25. Who knows what you need, but we're adding something in. And the minus one is we are taking something out. So maybe you're scheduled to go have coffee with a toxic friend of yours on Saturday. They just vent, they talk bad about people. You end up leaving feeling like trash. We're all too old for toxic friends. I give you permission to minus one that person out of your schedule. Or there may be other things. Like for me, snow removal in the winter. So I live in Michigan, so lots of snow comes here. My driveway is this weird shape where you can't just like snow plow it back and forth really easily. You have to do all these weird configurations, and it should take maybe an hour, but oftentimes it takes like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then it's not done well. So a number of years ago, I decided to minus one to see, if I pay $35 every time there's more than an inch of snow, how much does that cost me per season? I mean, I think last season, maybe he did it 10 times. It's because it'll snow and then it'll melt and then it'll snow more. This season might be a heavier season, but to have $350 go towards me having, in that situation, that would have been 15 to 20 hours of my time in the evenings when my kids, I'd rather be hanging out with them. That changes how I approach life. So maybe getting groceries delivered once in a while and see how that feels. Does that help you feel more rejuvenated? So we want to plus one and minus one to begin to build that menu of things we want to take off our plate or add in to have the most effective weekend we can have. So as you implement this, we want to try it out, build that menu, have different tasks to add and remove, and then track it, see how you feel about it. So there's a guy named Parkinson who was from Britain, and he discovered two really important things. So Parkinson's law, there's part of it that a lot of people have heard about, and there's other parts that people haven't heard about. The part that most people have heard about is that work expands to fill the time available. So back in college, you realized the night before that you had a paper due the next day, and you stay up all night and you write the paper and you get a C plus on it. It's not your best work, but you got it done. Maybe you realize you have a paper due in 2 weeks and you start working on it. You spend 2 weeks working on it. You fill up that time and you still get a C plus, or maybe get a B plus. Who knows what you got? But work tends to expand to the time we give to it. That's one part of Parkinson's law. The second part that's often not reported is the natural bloating of organizations. So he looked at the British Navy, and he saw that anytime any paperwork was added, so a signature for this, a form for this, sign off for this, form 21-AB, form 21-ABC, once that form was in, once that sign off was in there, it was near impossible to pull it back out of that system. And so what happens is there's a natural bloating of organizations when we have form after form after form. If we don't do something, to combat that Parkinson's law of that growth. So when we give ourselves less time to do something, it makes us be more efficient. So imagine I said to you, okay, you normally work 5 days next week. You can only work 4 days and you can't work longer days. So you have 20% less time that you are able to work next week. I imagine you would start to then think of all the things you have to do next week and start to itemize them. Okay, what brings in the money? Where are the big responsibilities? You'd probably keep your counseling clients. You may start to evaluate if some of your counseling clients are lower pay or sliding fee, like, do I want to keep them on there? You'd probably look at things like, are the checks coming in from insurance companies? Is the billing going correctly? You might look at some of your marketing things, but there's other things that might fall by the wayside. You might get behind on email. You might get behind on some of the networking. You might get behind on a few other things, but that gives you information that maybe those things aren't the best use of your time. Maybe you should hire an assistant to check your email. Maybe you should look at different ways that you can do what you do best and outsource the rest. And so combating Parkinson's law, the natural bloating, with Parkinson's law that work expands to the time that it's given, those two sides of the coin help us run a lean, effective business while also focusing in on the productivity that actually does matter. So when we use this to your advantage, you're going to start setting shorter deadlines for yourself and break these tasks into smaller chunks. We're not going to feel like we have to do an entire task all at once or we're somehow a failure. So even between these webinars today, I'm a single dad. There's a lot of stuff to do around a house. There was laundry that needed to get folded. And sure, I could have paid someone to come into my house to fold laundry. Maybe that's not a great use of my time, but it's something that, there's a caretaking side of it, of taking care of my kids' laundry. They do some of their own laundry. They're kind of in that in between where they're starting to sometimes do it, sometimes not do it. But taking care of the laundry, I got probably a third of it done between one webinar, then just got the rest of it done and then went and made a smoothie. Giving myself those bite-sized bits of what can I do here allows me to get more done in a shorter period of time. Okay, we want to start to use neuroscience for better outcomes when we're looking at our productivity. So as I was writing Thursday as the new Friday, I mentioned at the very beginning that one thing that I was doing is I wouldn't look at my phone in regards to any sort of things that would like get in the way of my writing. Now, a few other things that are really helpful is to look at your environment through the lens of creating different environments for different tasks. So when I was writing Thursday as the new Friday in this very office, this couch wasn't here. I had a kind of brown leather chair that was in here, and I would move that to a different spot into the writing spot. So I'd slide that leather chair over. I had a different desk that I only used when I was writing. So I put that in front of that chair. I had a different light that I brought into this office. So instead of these bright kind of white lights that I have on my face right now that are more for presentations, I had a nice soft light that was over in the corner that I would turn on when I was writing. I had a different playlist. I had a playlist that was only my writing playlist and looked at different hertz levels that are shown to help with focus. So every aspect of my environment, I thought through to say, this is the writing environment. We can do things like this in a variety of different ways. So this white shirt, for example, I have two of these, and this was my shirt for all my presentations. I had 200 podcast interviews in the lead up for that book launch. So in August and September of 2022, in the lead up to that book launch, 2021, lead up to that book launch, I had one shirt on and then I'd wash it and the next day wear the other shirt. I knew I was in presentation mode when I had this shirt on. I like how it feels. It triggers something in my brain. So using our environment to do certain things is one way that we can be more efficient. As well, we can start to say, okay, I'm going to have different things that trigger me into flow state differently. So one thing is to use our subconscious mind when we have a big task. So at the end of every Thursday, when I was done with that chapter, typically, I would then look at all of the notes that I had in the lead up to the next chapter. So I had a Trello board that I had different stories. I had different research for that chapter. And I would put it all up on my whiteboard that's over here. So all the big, probably 6 or 7 parts of that chapter. So each chapter would have at least 2 to 3 stories, at least 2 to 3 research examples, and then kind of the main points. And I would just put up there anything that comes to mind. So for example, the chapter that's on curiosity, I put up all the science things, all the things, and then I would just stop before I left for the week. and say, okay, what comes to mind when I just think about this topic? When I think about the topic of curiosity, curiosity killed the cat. That came out really early on. Like, where the heck did that come from? So I just put curiosity killed the cat up there. Um, I put up there, why do we, when we're kids, act so curious and somehow we lose that? Is there any science behind that? So I just kind of started putting up some questions, and then we walk away from the project. And our brain keeps on working, thinking about those thoughts, and then you're going to have aha moments. And so, finding those ways to use the neuroscience for us to have better outcomes, to be able to have our brain work in the background around these tough tasks, is one of the ways that we can do that. From new patients faced with an empty lobby and no idea where to find their therapist, to clinicians with a session running overtime and the doorbell ringing, some of the most anxiety-ridden moments of a therapy appointment happen before a session even starts. This episode's sponsor, the Receptionist for iPad, helps you tackle some of that pre-appointment apprehension. The Receptionist for iPad is an easy-to-use digital client check-in system that helps your visitors check in securely to their appointments and notify their practitioners of their arrival via SMS, email, or your preferred channel. No more confusion, endless lobby checking, or having clients sign in on paper logbooks. Start a 14-day free trial of the Receptionist for iPad by going to thereceptionist.com/practice. Make sure to start your trial with that link, and you'll also get your first month free if you decide to sign up. Again, start your trial over at thereceptionist.com/practice. So we want to look at mindfulness and meditation as part of this to allow our brains to disconnect, to get back to that baseline. We want to have those brain breaks. The University of Illinois did a study on vigilance decrement. So vigilance decrement, vigilance meaning how well we pay attention to something. Decrement meaning breaking down over time. So vigilance decrement is where we believe that our energy is like this smoothie, that when it's gone, it's gone. The only way to reset it is to go to sleep and wake up and have your other smoothie of energy. So that was the thinking before, that over time your vigilance went down. So they did this research study to see if that was true. So they had college students come in, they gave them a 4-digit number, say it was 4213, and they had them look at the computer for an hour. And every time 4213 came up, they had a button to push, and every time it was 4211, like 7127, all these other numbers, you don't hit the button. They experienced vigilance decrement. The amount they paid attention at the beginning was better than how they paid attention at the end. So there was vigilance decrement. They proved that. Well, then what they did is they had a second group where they gave them the same number, same setup, but at the 20-minute mark, they gave them a 1-minute break. They did something like, hey, we put you on the wrong computer. Hang out in the lobby. There's no TV. There's no cell phones, no magazines, just 1-minute break. We'll get you set up on this other computer. Brought them in, put them on that other computer, then gave them 20 minutes there, and then gave them another 1-minute break. So they may have said, hey, it's time for your 1-minute break. Stand up, step out of the office, whatever. They found there was no vigilance decrement when they had only 2 minutes of breaks during that 1 hour. So what that shows us is the brain, even if it's in a safe environment like my office, where I know there's not a tiger here, I know there's not a bear or a walrus or something that's going to kill me, but our brains don't know that. It's still a primitive brain. We haven't evolved that much since 200,000 years ago, except for maybe, our wisdom teeth. Our brains still, when they go into new places or new like environments, it still is hyper vigilant. And we want to use that to our advantage by giving ourselves brain breaks to come back and have that vigilance decrement not occur. And then we can do that cognitive restructuring of our brains. So a little bit about time management and mindsets. One of the biggest things is that we have our biggest aha moments when we slow down, when we take that time to step back. Our aha moments often are if we're in the shower, if we're on a walk, sometimes in the middle of the night. Last night, woke up in the middle of the night. I'm teaching improv tonight, and I had an idea for an improv game that I'm going to do. Those times when we genuinely slow down is when our brains get to that deeper thinking that we need to get to, instead of that hashtag hustle like crap of working 80 hours a week, but then you end up having to redo everything because you're just not that good at it. Let's slow down a little bit. We want to have that growth mindset, that we're moving towards more learning, more activity, moving into something different, and that flexibility and adaptive, adaptability. 8 webinars in the week. I got this. Keep your mouth moving, Joe. When we think about best practices for time management, planning out your day can be really helpful. So for me, I put everything in my calendar. Jen, my assistant who's helping out here, she knows minute by minute what my day is going to look like. If I know that I have a presentation like this in 2 weeks, then I back up and say the week before I need to be going through slides. I'm doing a closing keynote for the mental health marketing conference. I have time set aside to go through those notes. When I submit to the team, here's what I want the slides to look like. We then say, okay, they need to have them done by this date, so Joe can review them this date, have some edits by this date. Then it's all in the calendar. And if it's in the calendar, you're less likely to just ignore it. We want to be delegating tasks effectively. So thinking about first, what do you hate doing in your business? What are the things that you just loathe? Now, there's some things that you still have to be a part of. Every quarter I need to be sitting down with my bookkeeper to look at the money and what's flowing from it. That may not be the most fun, but it's one of those things that I have to be doing. I have to have eyes on it. But are there things that we can start delegating that you absolutely hate? Next, we want to look at what are the things that you like doing, but really you shouldn't be doing. So I remember a number of years ago, when I was doing the podcast, I would record the whole podcast. I would drop it into GarageBand. I would do the sound engineering. I would export it. I would upload it. I would then do a visual design of it. I'd then make the notes for the show. Every 30-minute podcast would take me about 2 hours outside of that to do all of the management around that podcast. I loved doing it. I really liked doing the creative design. I liked doing the images. My artistic side came out. But when I outsourced that and had someone else start doing it, I realized I could do 5 podcasts in the time that it would take me to do one. And then I had more time to do the art that I do like. So I took up watercolor painting a couple years ago and I play with that and have fun with it. And who knows if I'll ever have an art show or sell it or anything, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And there's ways that we can do that where we take it off the business and say that's going to be a hobby now. That doesn't have to be part of the business. We want to start also utilizing technology and tools. There's so many tools depending on what you're trying to do, whether it's social media management, whether it's, running things through some sort of AI software to have it do some editing, or creating different documents. There's tons of technology tools. And we're going to get to the Q&A section in just a second. So feel free, as you have questions, to keep putting those in the chat. Go ahead and also virtually raise your hand if you want to go back and forth talking a little bit about time management. At the very bottom, you're going to see reactions. If you click on that, you'll see raise hand. And then when you're in there, you're going to notice that right in there, you're going to be able to help raise your hand. And then that lets me know that you want to unmute and have a little conversation. So Thursday is the new Friday. The overall concept is that we have internal inclinations. The research shows that there's 3 internal inclinations that top performers have. So we walk through, are we curious? Can we move on it? Can we keep an outsider perspective? Those 3 areas help us do more. Then we want to work on slowing down. And then we want to sprint. And so we're going to talk a little bit about sprint types in a minute. I think that graphic is coming up. Looks like it says use graphic from the book, but it's not in here. So we'll make sure we get that to you or post it on our social media. I missed that in the edits. But yeah, the sprint types. So there's 4 different sprint types. So the first part of your sprint. So sometimes you may have heard, okay, go sprint, batch things together. When we think about sprinting, there's 2 different elements. So think of like an XY graph. And so the first part is, what type of work are you doing? So are you doing just one type of work and we're digging into that? So like writing Thursday is the new Friday. That was all I was working on Thursdays. Or are we doing different types of work? So every 20 minutes, shifting into other high level things. Now, we aren't multitasking. We aren't doing it where we are jumping from email and jumping to this, but we're saying, okay, what is the best use of my time? I personally like variety, and I'm going to make sure I do a lot of that. So first it's, do we do just one thing or a lot of things? The second part of it is it happening? Is it recurring over and over? So is it always the first Monday of the month, or is it every Thursday you're working on Thursday is the new Friday? Or do you have more of a retreat model where it's an intensive, where you go away for, say, a weekend? So on one side, we have how I wrote Thursday is the new Friday. One task every Thursday. So it's on repeat. Worked for me. That's how I tend to operate better than like the retreat model. Dr. Jeremy Sharp, who has the Testing Psychologist podcast, I talk about him in the book. So he will find a place that he can go to that he can rent. He has all these qualifiers that he wants to have as part of it. So it has to be walking distance from a vegan restaurant. It has to have indoor and outdoor space, all sorts of different things. And then he brings a bunch of work there for 2 or 3 days and just hunkers down. So he gets his marketing plan done for his testing psychology practice. He gets a bunch of podcast episodes recorded. He maybe reaches out to guests to get the whole next season scheduled up. He has a lot of different tasks, but they're all high level tasks, and he's doing it as an intensive. So that's what we want to do when it comes to our sprinting. But we want to have when we work defined by the life blocking that we do. So we say, when are we going to work? What are the hard boundaries and what are the soft boundaries? So I wrote Thursday is the new Friday. On Fridays, I don't work. I don't have any ongoing clinical things. Once in a while, there's something that comes up where, Jen will say, hey, Joe, I really need your feedback on this. Sorry, it's a Friday. But for the most part, I'm not working on Fridays. So I've life blocked that. I know that every Tuesday night I'm doing improv, and that's just a non-negotiable for me. There's these blocks that are in my life that my business needs to work around. We can start to step into some soft boundaries. So maybe you say, I'm sick of checking my email after the kids go to bed. That doesn't feel rejuvenating. It's not when I work best. I need to figure something out. Maybe you start to set some blocks around that. Now, when we look at some of the benefits of the 4-day work week, I just recently, in preparing for the mental health marketing keynote, was looking at how many scholarly articles. So I was on Google Scholar looking at how many articles there have been in the last year around the 4-day work week. There are over 1,400 scholarly articles that I could be citing as the benefits of the 4-day work week. A few things that have been noted. There was the Iceland study, the UK study, a few other studies, but those are the big ones. If you just type in UK 4-day work week study, they found that the productivity of a 32-hour work week was the same or better than a 40-hour work week. They're able to see now that people were wasting time in a 40-hour work week, talking around the water cooler, feeling burned out, that a 32-hour week is actually better for people's brains. Now, as we start to think about how do we do this, of course, if you have people that are hourly or you have people that are contractors versus full-time employees, to start to think through how do you implement a 4-day work week? How do you allow people to have flexibility in scheduling? For me, I trust my team that they will be able to make the best schedule for themselves. And so I do have some people that work on the weekends. I do have some people that work in evenings. I want them to have that flexibility to know that, if they have to go to the doctor or if they hurt their ankle, that they're able to take time off to, recuperate and to do what's best for their bodies and for their families. So making sure that you're thinking through, how do I want to run this business in a way that helps people actually become the people that they should be, not just to be, parts of your business. As you implement this, there's some steps to transitioning to a 4-day work week. So if you're going to do it, there is a Harvard Business Review article I wrote. If you just type in HBR and then my last name, Sanok, or 4-day work week, you'll see that whole walkthrough. It's aimed at how do you do this if you are an employee, but you can just flip it if you are the employer. It's a full walkthrough. I do trainings with people in implementing this also. But basically, you want to get people that are team members that have similar job roles. So say therapist. Get them together, say, okay, I want us to transition to the 4-day work week. This is just going to be a 3-month study. We're going to see how it goes. So let's talk through first the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you're already judged on. So it could be sessions per week. It could be total money that comes in. It could be a variety of things. And then we want to set a KPI for the DNA for this group. So maybe it's that we never check emails outside of our time here, that we keep our paperwork time to X number of hours per week. So then every single week we look at the KPIs. Are we up? Are we down? How are we measuring the impact on productivity and well-being? And then each week we want to have a quantitative and qualitative discussion about what's working with this. What do we know from a data perspective, but also a personal perspective? Hey, I got to go to my son's baseball game. I haven't done that in years. Then we can start to say at the end, okay, let's bring this all together and think through, could this apply to the rest of the practice? So as we put this all together, we want to start integrating that plus one, minus one, Parkinson's law, the neuroscience, and that 4-day work week. It doesn't have to be Fridays either. It's more looking at what is more flexible with your staff. This is going to help you also attract other staff differently than if you were a more rigid practice. We want to create a personalized productivity plan and then track that progress as we make adjustments. So the time formula is first target, set clear and achievable goals as you're doing this. Then we're going to implement. So we're going to apply strategies and techniques consistently. Then we're going to monitor. So we're going to go back and look at it. And then we're going to evaluate. So we're going to target, implement, monitor, evaluate to help us go in that circle to start to achieve more of those goals. All right, let's talk questions. I'm going to jump into this chat and all right, Jen, go ahead and send that find your sprint type to everybody and just put that out there, and then people can just directly download it for their sprint type. Chad, are the new marketing and networking courses already in Next Level Practice? Yes, Chad, those are in there for you. So feel free to go through those. Those are in Next Level Practice. So feel free to check that out. Other questions. Chad's one of our superstars in Next Level Practice. She comes to, I swear, like almost every meeting. Thanks, Jen, for putting that in the chat. So that slide about finding your sprint type that was missing, feel free to grab that and just download it. Keep it for yourself. That's from inside the book. So what questions do you have about time management? If you want to raise your hand, you're welcome to raise your hand as well. I see there was one that Rebecca asked. First, how do you find balance between flexibility and strong boundaries? So Rebecca, I would say that's where the idea of soft and hard boundaries are really helpful. You might want to grab this book. So it's Harvard Business Review's Boundaries, Priorities, and Finding Work-Life Balance. Awesome book. One of the chapters in it I wrote, but a lot of the other people that wrote in this book, there's so many great tips in it around boundaries and work-life balance and things like that. But the idea of soft boundaries and hard boundaries are non-negotiables. So if someone said to me, I want to work with you on Fridays, I say no. That's a hard boundary. I don't work with people ongoing on Fridays. A soft boundary, you might say, is more of an aspiration. And so I would start with, in regards to flexibility and strong boundaries, to just start with, are you happy? Like, are you generally happy about how life looks for you with your schedule? And if the answer is no, then we got to start digging and say, okay, why is that? Is it phase of life things? There's times in life that are much busier than other times in life. My kids are in a sweet spot right now where they're not yet cranky teenagers and they're not running all over the place all the time. And they're not kids that have trouble putting their shoes on. They're making their own lunches. They're doing some of their own laundry. So we're in this sweet spot, but there are phases of life that are just freaking busy. How is your health? I've been dealing with health issues since we were in Cancun 2 years ago, where I've had several emergency surgeries. I have to be aware that my health and my gut health and all that goes with that happened from salmonella 2 years ago. And still, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow to dig into that, to figure out what's going on. I need to be flexible with myself to say, sometimes when you're tired, you need to just lay down. Sometimes in an evening when you had plans with friends, your body just hurts because of this health concern. So I would look at that. And then, okay, if you're generally happy, what are goals that you have for your business and for your life? Is that a vacation? Is that to do more hobbies? Is that to try something? My neighbor, John, who we walk to and from school each day, he this year decided he was going to try to do a new thing every month. So he tried improv last January, and he's really good at it, and he's still doing improv. He just last weekend had his first voice lesson. And he's just trying things for the first time, as, I think he's like 40 or something like that. So finding time for those things that will push your own boundaries, I would say that. All right, next question is, one of your tips in your book was to stop thinking about work outside of work. Since founding my practice a month ago, I'm waking up at 2 a.m. almost every day, and my brain just keeps thinking about work. Any tips? Okay, so anytime something's exciting, your brain wants to work on it. Now, your business may not right now feel exciting, but I think part of it is it's so new. You just opened a month ago. So part of it could be you're freaking excited about your business. There's so many opportunities. Your brain maybe hasn't had to think this hard in a really long time. And so it's on overdrive. It's just running full tilt, and it needs permission to not run full tilt. So I might consider before bed writing down all the things that are exciting to you about your business, all the areas that you're thinking about, what you're going to do about those areas, and to kind of give your brain permission to chill out a little bit. To say, in the morning, I am going to start by brainstorming what to do about this stuck point. But brain, tonight, you don't have to work on that. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, I found that just the breathing exercise where you just focus on the tip of your nose when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm with you. Depending on your age, I feel like the last 6 months, something's kind of switched in the way that my brain and hormones is, where falling back asleep isn't quite as easy as it was. So there may be something there that could be with supplements, could be with magnesium, could be different habits before bed. But I think that doing some of those things where you kind of brain dump before bed and then work on that right when you wake up, so your brain knows like I got it. You don't have to be up all night. And sometimes depending. Um, it may be good if you're finding that maybe at 2 a.m. go work on that and let your brain dig into it at 2 a.m. and then go back to sleep. But maybe give yourself an hour of extra sleep if you can. Okay, board games. Oh, Taco Cat, Goat Cheese Pizza. We love that game. That is a fun game. All right. Top 3 tips for burnout proof your practice from day one. Ooh, good question. Okay. I would say retain a certain amount of time that you will not work. So there can be a habit when you're launching a business that not only are you working on it during the week, but when you're on date night with a partner, you're like, I'm so excited about the website. I'm so excited about the marketing. I'm so excited about this new thing because you have some genuinely exciting things going on in your life. That's a big deal to be doing a lot of that stuff. And then all you're doing is talking about work and you're going to wake up at 2 in the morning. So I would set some clear boundaries. We are not talking about this. We do this about my co-parent, my daughter's mom. When I'm on a date night with my partner, we say this is not going to be time that we talk about or vent about things that are going on with the back and forth. We just set that boundary because you don't want that to cloud it. You want to have time that you can just be free of any of that stress. Number 2, I would hire a virtual assistant as soon as you can afford it. Having someone that can be checking your email, answering your phones, scheduling networking meetings, making your life easier, maybe even in the contract having some personal things like scheduling hair appointments, rearranging things, making reservations to go out to eat. Having someone that can do that as soon as you can afford it just makes you feel bougie, but then also helps you then become a business owner and not just someone that has a counseling job that you happen to create. And then last, I would say is celebrate. Say, what are we going to work towards? So even just today, I was running numbers on how many members I want us to get for certain financial goals. And, Jen and Sarah don't even know this, but the number is 671. And I'm going to talk to the team about why 671 is the number I want us to hit. And so that when we hit that number, we can have a big celebration in some way. Because there's certain things around that number that trickle down. And so finding what is that thing that you can get the team or yourself aligned around. And so maybe you're just starting out and it's like, when I hit 20 clients in 1 week, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to take myself out to eat. I'm going to take me and my partner out to eat. We're going to invite another couple that are colleagues and we're going to talk a little business out while we're eating so we can write it off. Like, who cares? Like, celebrate those wins, because the tendency when you're a high achiever or even not is that we have these goalposts and every time you hit it, you're like, well, I could have tried harder. Let's make those goalposts, a little smaller, And we're going to change that as we go. All right. Other questions we got coming. We got just a couple of, Pit. Yeah. Ticket to Ride, Spoons, Catan, Sushi Go. Have all those in my basement. Chad, we're on the same page around board games. Awesome pants. All right. Check out the communities. Sarah put that link in there to read all about them. Thank you. All right. Going through, not board games, but card games. Flux, Quiddler. Okay. 2 I'll have to check out. Thank you. Sarah, thank you for that link to my book as well. Being effective with putting out fires and coming back from it. Okay. Whenever there's a fire, you first just put it out. You don't think about it, you just put out the fire. Then we want to reverse engineer how far back does this go? So say Jen and Sarah come to me and say, okay, there was this problem with Level Up Week. We put out the fire, we get people into the webinar, okay, but next week or the week after when we're debriefing Level Up Week, we need to look and say, okay, whatever it was happened. who was responsible, what needs to change, what can we put in our calendars a month or two ahead of the next level up week so that that problem, that fire doesn't disrupt the next level up week, that we're able to plan for it and think through it in a different way. So I think coming back from it, also, are there things that people need to just apologize for? Depending on the fire, people can say things they regret. They can say things that are inappropriate. Evaluating what level, are those at a level that someone needs to get fired? Are they at a level where we need to have some reconciliation and some ownership? All right. Check to see if you have Pylori. Okay, I don't know that game either. I'm gonna have to download this text transmission of everything here. Love it. How can we take a 4-day work week when we have support staff who work 5 days a week? Don't have them work 5 days a week. So just have them. Yes, you need to have phone calls, but you can have overlap. You can say, okay, we're going to have these people. You're going to work 32 hours. You're going to work Monday through Thursday. We're going to have someone that is hired to just part-time work over the weekends to catch those phone calls. We just work to make sure that we know what are the KPIs of those people. Now, if someone, their only task is answering phones, there's nothing else, then yeah, you just need to have someone answer phones. But you can have all sorts of virtual services work on those things. The creativity and productivity almost always makes up for that loss of that 8 hours. All right, let's see. In reference to the +1, -1 exercise, how frequently would it make sense to engage this in the beginning? I would say every weekend so that you can build your +1 and your -1 quickly. So, this coming weekend, be like, what's my +1? What's my -1? And just do that for 8 weekends in a row. And then you're going to find, okay, reading a book with green tea makes me feel so much better than going for a walk with my kids. And both were +1s, but you realize that was more stressful than I thought it was going to be being with my kids. Or maybe it wasn't. And so really just I would say do that quite a bit. All right. Actually, work late night and sleep in because all day staff continue to consume my time. I shifted my schedule to support this and I am a night owl. Awesome. Yeah, I think finding when you work best is so important in regards to when's your best energy, when's your best kind of everything else. And thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an awesome day. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Level Up Week series. I hope you are getting so much help out of this. If you need extra help, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/apply. I would love to spend 30 minutes brainstorming with you as to your phase of practice and helping you determine whether a membership community or consulting is right for you. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. And we couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors. Today's episode is the Receptionist for iPad, which helps you tackle some of those pre-appointment apprehension. The Receptionist for iPad is an easy-to-use digital client check-in system. Think about when you go to maybe your doctor's office. Now you check in on an iPad, same sort of idea. You can get a free trial over at thereceptionist.com/practice. Again, that's thereceptionist.com/practice. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.